This is Morten from English TV. I am very honored and pleased to welcome my good friend Anthony Thirlby here on English. So welcome, Anthony.
Pleasure to be here, Morten. Good morning from Mexico.
I was just about to say that May 1st in Mexico, is that like forgetting your hat, being at the beach and drink a lot of beers, or?
No, it's just called being a stupid British person who keeps realising he's from Ireland. So yes, there was too much sunshine yesterday.
Anthony, I see on LinkedIn from time to time that you travel to exotic places, and first you can think, okay, he's on vacation all the time, but I realize that you also work sometimes, right? So, you also work as a consultant. So, what is it that you help people with?
So, the organisation I'm working at the minute, Romo, they've had a significant growth in both packaging and commercial. So, seeing the business go from say 20 million to 50 million in just under 2 years. Inevitably, with growth comes a huge amount of infrastructure pain and process pain. They've also invested quite heavily in the equipment side of things and software. So it's really just trying to re-establish what the right method of working through the business is. And then also from that is productize the sales opportunity into the market. So I love coming to Mexico. There's very much like Japan, there's a huge amount of print here, and there's still significant opportunity to grow and diversify.
Is it also a place where you can learn from them, or is it only one way?
Absolutely. I think you know what I've found in Mexico, because of the opportunity, and especially in the folding carton, pharma, FMCG market, they're very entrepreneurial and they don't hold back on growth. So I think from that sense of things of how you view the market, quite unusual that the domestic market is continuing to grow for them. So in terms of learning and education, it's nice to be inside of a market that's still in its infancy, if that makes sense. Obviously, in Europe and America, it's a very mature marketplace, and you have to really fight hard for the opportunities, where these guys are certainly having plenty of opportunities coming their way.
I can't help think about last week I was in Morocco, and basically what I realized there was that there is also a growth there for print, and I realized, okay, the internet is not as developed as in my country, for example. Do you think that in these developing markets it also has something to do with let's say the expansion of the internet, or is it
Absolutely
just because they have different culture?
No, I think you find in Mexico itself there's very few, if any, true online providers. It's quite ironic if you look at the general market in Europe now that the guys who are attaining growth are back on the online space. So here, like you said, very similar to Morocco, I'd imagine there's not been the opportunity to consolidate, certain products. So they have a tendency here to be more of a hybrid producer. So packaging, labels, commercial. So I find it fascinating because obviously in our world, we've had the fight for 15, 20 years of big online platforms and, the sort of commoditization of pricing as well. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I cannot see it being an immediate thing here either, because as I say, culturally and the demographic of people who buy print here are a little bit different from what we find in Europe.
Great introduction. I invited you because, as I mentioned to you, if we look at the offset manufacturers, I remember seeing that Manroland has machines that can run 20K, and we have Koenig & Bauer that can run 20K, and recently also Heidelberg announced their machine 21K. So that's a lot of work that these machines can take on and produce. And then I wanted to talk to you because I was wondering, is it still an important KPI when you invest in a machine, focusing on speed in your mind?
I think it certainly depends on what market you're in. I think speed is only a huge requirement if you have the volume to facilitate that continuous need of 20 or 21K. I think what you find in the market here and in Mexico, there would be a requirement for that because they still print 80, 90, 100,000 runs. Go back into Europe, where the average run length now in the commercial space is 2,500, 3,000. Packaging away from the big groups is now becoming more SKU related than actually volume related. But I still say this, we may have machines running at 20, 21,000, but the understanding from an integration perspective, actually feeding those machines from either from a product perspective or software architecture, is still stuck in the 1990s. So speed is one thing. I think facilitating job transition is probably more of a painful space for a lot of people. And I'd probably say that maybe 1% of the world would actually utilize machines of that specification.
The reason why I was asking you was also because I was thinking that I think that the average utilization of many machines in Europe in the offset space is in the range of, let's be friendly and say 25%. So when you have machines that goes faster, the only thing that happens is basically that the utilization average will decrease, right?
Absolutely. But then also with that acceleration of speed, you've got a huge amount of pressure into the front end of the business. You know, so it's all
Mm,
very well running twice as quick, but you have to actually process 3 times as quick to keep the machine fed. So the
mm,
utilization thing is something I've worked with, Heidelberg in the past on, and obviously several different customers around the world. It's amazing how we buy these machines for multi-million euros and do nothing as a business to create an infrastructure to facilitate what you've purchased. So I would say a huge part of that is the lack of understanding about how to truly utilize an offset machine. I've obviously over the years with yourself had different dialogue about what's offset and what's digital. I think the
mm,
reality is there is still a huge opportunity as an industry for us to learn and understand what is required. I think leading the
mm.
market with speed is fine for the 1%, but beyond that, it's actually assisting those relevant customers to actually facilitate and utilize what they have, because
Mm.
you're not talking about insignificant investment to get into that space, and it seems a little bit ludicrous that we invest all this money to have 25% of it as sellable time.
Mm. And that is, of course, comes back to, because I mean, you have always, I can tell you, and that is like with the deepest respect. When I got to meet you and got to know you, also before we met in person in the UK last year, I sometimes didn't understand why you were so focused on OEE, right? And then I realized when we met that basically what you were doing was saying that, okay, in order to be able to make money on the lowest cost, you need to produce each sheet as efficient as possible. But you still need to feed the machine. I mean, you talk about the workflow and everything that goes into the machine, but it is actually the sales and the volume that goes on the machine
Absolutely.
that is probably the most difficult thing, right?
Of course it is, because we have a tendency to provide ourselves as real service providers. Okay, now depending on where you are in the world, that means different things. So you've been to North America a lot. I would say they are probably the leading force worldwide in true service providing and selling. They actually have professional sales forces with a productization that goes to market. I think what we generally find in the rest of the world is we have an entrepreneurial frontman who runs the business, who is a fantastic salesperson, but sometimes they can oversell what they can actually produce. So you have this inevitability of actually where the sweet spot is. Flipping that back, I think technology now in terms of how you can accelerate all these functions in between orders is incredible. So I would never not be very, very positive about all the manufacturers, about how they facilitate job-to-job transactions. But you're right. I think it's very rare you meet a company that has a true sales-led focus that then feeds into the business. We have a tendency
Mm.
as print providers to sell everything to the market and then throw it over the fence to our poor colleagues and then complain that it doesn't come out on time. So I think it's an interesting space. I think what technology has done in the last 15 years of inline color control and autoplate systems and wash up functions and multicolors, it's incredible. But you have to understand how to sell that into your client base. And I
Mm.
think that's still a huge opportunity for us as an industry to professionalize the sales funnel to the market and understand what it is you're trying to be. Because unless you're a huge facility or you have a huge demographic in terms of, America, again, they have metro areas, so you can provide large format, inkjet, fulfillment, offset, digital, you can do everything. When you're in
Mhm.
mainland Europe, you're competing against 3 to 4 countries on the same
Mhm.
product possibly.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think we've still got a huge way from a manufacturer's perspective to understand the pain the customers need to facilitate this high speed.
I can't help think about another thing that I just realized when you were talking, and that was also like I was in with Saxo Print in Dresden a year's time ago, or something like that. And you probably been
Yes.
in. It's a fascinating printing company with all the Heidelberg machines just lined up after each other. And I was thinking that even that they have very very fast turnaround time and relatively short setup time and all the thing of what they were doing. I think that when you are, let's say, an online print and you have many machines, you basically need to think, okay, they are getting so many orders of different types that they basically need to produce simultaneously
Absolutely.
and not sequentially, right? So maybe I remember when I was started in the industry years ago, there was a typical kind of come into a printing company. They have a 4 and a 5 color let's say older generation press. Let's replace those two machines with one faster machine, right? But then they realized that the flexibility of more machines is sometimes also a necessity. Therefore, it's not only speed, it is also how you utilize based on how many shifts you have, based on the capacity in your
Absolutely.
bindery, based on all those kind of things, right?
Well, I think it's interesting. You look at a company such as Saxo or Flyer or any of the big guys in that market, you actually put that into context as a business model. They're a software-driven logistics business. They're not a printing company. So,
Yeah,
when,
they just happens to have printing machines, right?
absolutely, the printing is a byproduct of actually selling an onboarding for an order and the logistics. But
Yeah.
what that gives you and what they've been phenomenal at, all these guys in that space, obviously the guys like at Laser Tobacco as well with Esmond, they lead the market by making print very easy to understand. Whereas most printing companies make it so complicated for a customer to understand what it is they need to purchase. So I think, that's one aspect of the industry where they've done very well. But we still come back to the mass market of 80% worldwide who still are trying to compete and find what it is they need to do. So I think coming back into that is that if you can productize a machine so it only does 130 GSM, 85 leaflets all day, the world's a lovely place. The reality is most people have to do multiple substrates, multiple size changes, multiple wash-ups. So it's how do you alleviate that? Because that inevitably is why these machines are only 23, 25%. Because we're inevitably as an industry trying to provide all functions and all services to a client base that doesn't necessarily understand what it is you need to produce.
And of course, when you have like the latest generation of machines where they have automatic washing and faster plate inserting and all those kind of things, of course, that talk down to the more SKUs and to something that is in between the
Yeah,
digital space, basically, right? But I was thinking because I mentioned this to you before we turned on the recording, because when you see the large offset OEMs announcing that, oh, we have 20% more efficient machines, I was thinking for a second, and maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but I was just thinking maybe that is even not true, because maybe the investment will give you way more productivity, because you would not replace the newest machine that you bought a year ago. You will replace an old whatever brand you have, which comes from before automation, before auto
absolutely.
washing, before everything. So it is 50, 60, 70% maybe of productivity gains you have investing in these machines,
I
right?
think it's always interesting, Morten. I've always had this conversation with a few of the providers. Productivity is not about when you're printing, it's what's next. The true definition of efficiency is last sheet, first sheet, not when you're printing at 18, 21,000. So as long as you've got an understanding of how you prepare to utilize what's there, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
The brilliant thing about our industry, there's still a huge opportunity for a lot of people to do that. And I'm not necessarily saying that they have to, but if you're talking about utilization and productivity and the benefit of actually what you invest into, it's got nothing to do with the press, right? The press is a byproduct almost like ink on paper to do a printed product. And I still find it amazing. We spend multi-million euros, and these machines take 6 to 7 months to build. But even from the equipment providers, they don't do a strategic plan with the client about how they set their business up for the 6 months the machine is being built. So you don't have this huge surprise like, oh, I have a new 8-color turning up tomorrow. And we're still running our processes from the 1980s on our 8-color 102. And it's just, honestly, I love it because what you find with printing people is they're very honest. If they don't know, they'll say, so I think I think the void between market requirements and market production is growing higher. And as you
Yeah.
say, going quicker and quicker, great. I think if you look at the publishing and magazine market, where web offset is obviously having a hugely difficult time in pagination run rates, a 21,000 machine, 8-color running reels makes perfect sense, absolute perfect sense. But again, how many of those machines can
Agree.
you sell worldwide to sustain a business?
That is, of course, one question. The other thing is, of course, whether people they're investing in it. Because I don't know if you saw that I wrote an article that actually I got a little bit bashed about it, because I wrote that commercial print is growing. And then I was just like, they were like, why can you say that? Because it has been a decreasing market since the 90s, basically. And I said, the problem is that we have the wrong measures, because if you take all the rotogravures and the web offset presses out of the market, you of course have a huge decrease in the total volume. But that actually leaves more, let's say,
Transactions.
healthy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Measuring volume is a antiquated way of measuring success in a market. If you, again,
Agree, 100%.
so yes, printing might have been multiple 10,000 euro orders. Now it's hundreds of orders of 100 euros. So printing is growing. The requirement of print is growing.
Yeah.
But if you put it there as a measurement of value, of course it's going to show a decline. The actual requirement of the product is growing.
And I remember because a long time ago, you and I, we spoke about that the offset was digital. And I think that you were a little bit reluctant of digital in the beginning because basically the cost base was way higher than in offset, right? But I think also we spoke about that when you have something that has a higher cost base, but that can be sold for a higher margin.
Absolutely.
Basically, and that's my point as well, that when we talk about a decreasing market, well, it doesn't matter as long as you get more money per sheet you sell, right?
Honestly, Morten, if you put it into a very simple, business associated idea, would you rather do 90 million impressions at a commoditized price because the market forces you that way, or do 9 million and charge 10 times the amount per sheet? So sometimes
can I make the choice? I go for the latter.
Well, you look at your capital investment cycle, you look at your depreciation process. There's so many benefits to not having high utilization if you've got the right niche market. The unfortunate thing for us as an industry, technology drives niche away very soon. So even as you get into you go into applications of actually things like Scodex and all these things, that's brilliant, but it's actually bringing everybody into the same cost space again. So so coming back into the offset world, I think different markets have different requirements. I think OEE is a definitive measurement to see if you are returning what you've invested in, of course. But I think from a conversation between client base and manufacturers, it's brilliant that you can make ready in 2 minutes, and it's brilliant you can do, auto plate systems, and you can do all these wonderful things. Even today in 2024, I've probably only visited 10 to 12 companies in the world who understand that. And that's not because they're better. It's just the fact that they're what I would say, the performance area. They actually truly set up their business model to utilize what's being provided. The rest of the industry, as I said, is still on a journey. So confusing the market with higher speed is also one thing, because you actually, I think you're also capitulating your own margin by trying to compete against yourself on your other products in the portfolio. So,
It also raises another question, because as digital gets faster and faster, it's kind of interesting, because if let's say that you typically in Europe, you run at least 2 shifts, right? Quite a few actually 3 shifts as well, right? And if you think that the utilization of a 18K offset press is, let's say, 25%, and then you have let's say an HP 100K.
Yep.
And you run it almost entirely with 3 shifts, the output is almost the same.
It is, but you've also got the digital models in cut sheet are still not industrialized enough as yet. Okay, so I can say that hand on heart, they're fantastic machines, and some of the product portfolio where you get really brilliant yields per sheet, undoubted. I think inkjet is where the space is going to be now moving forward, because I remember when I was working in that world, there was already a perfect inkjet machine out there, but everybody held different patents on the sheet transfer system. So I think now that they've run out, you'll probably see in the next 2 to 3 years what's been promised for the last 10 years really starting to, I wouldn't say create a lack of understanding about what's the right platform. I think the reality is, in commercial and packaging, you have to have a hybrid model. Inevitably, packaging has been driven down into more short-run SKUs that will bring the inkjet and the World Lander and all these guys into it. And that's what I still love. I still think it's still a very, an interesting space about what is right. Offset. I remember when I started in digital in 2000, offset was going to be dead within 5 years. Offset's still the strongest market worldwide by quite a way. So I think inkjet will come through. I think going back into the cut sheet digital world, I think there's an acceleration of that market that needs to be done in the next 3 to 4 years to keep up with what inkjet will provide.
Anthony, when you work as a consultant and visit printing companies around the world, these conversations that you and I have, for example, now, is that also the type of conversations you have with your customers?
Absolutely. I think, listen, at the end of the day, one of those manufacturers, so Manroland and Konnenbauer, Heidelberg, RMGT, they want to sell you something, and they will pretend that they're doing it for your benefit. At the end of the day, yes, but the reality is people are very confused now, because in a commoditized market, there's more choice than ever about what to invest into. So yes, a lot of the questions are about how do you do multiple SKUs into a productized environment? where you sort of you take away the emotional context of what it is you sell. You know, because at the end of the day, we sell products as printers. So I don't care what anybody tells me. You sell a product. Secondary behind that is, you know, Drupal is an interesting thing, as we know, because the world has changed. Where there used to be significant developments every 4 years, and you'd be wowed. Yes, you need that. Still have that environment to come and see. But the reality is, in the market, there's new products coming out every 12 to 18 months. So a lot of customers are very interested in understanding the technology space. I think when you're trying to sell at a premium level, like the likes of Heidelberg do for their machines, you then have to qualify and quantify why that premium is there. Because when you're at 25% utilization, what's the difference between the machines? So again, it's trying to understand I think printing is still so emotional one. You know, we invest significant amounts of money without sometimes all the details that we would do in other aspects of life. So I think simplifying that process,
It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm sitting in my workroom right now, and I remember when I bought this house 20 years ago. That was when the iGen 3 was announced by Xerox.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, should we buy a Xerox iGen 3 or should we buy this house, because it was the exact same price, right? and it puts, I think it maybe puts the finger on what you're talking about, because I mean, still a majority of the printing companies in the world are privately family-owned companies, right? So the investment that you have in technology becomes so significant that your life is depending on it, right? I was in Israel just a few weeks ago, where I also visited Atlanta, and I said to one of the guys I spoke to, said that the thing is that when OEMs sell hardware or software for that matter to a PSP, they are depending on it. If they make a wrong choice, they are out of business, and that it can cost their entire private equity, whatever they have, right? And I think that maybe that is one of the reasons why, when you talk about that it is very emotional, you still see a majority of the websites in the printing industry, the first thing you see is the Heidelberg press, right? And instead of what you bring to market and the applications and the value you bring.
There's two things in that point. I think once you understand that the digital providers are not print businesses and they're consumables businesses, the reality is they want to increase your volume because it's self-generating from an income level. And if you accelerate that process, digital doesn't have the shelf life of an offset machine if you run volume. Secondary, I've tried many times, and along with some other very good friends and customers, nobody in the world has utilized an offset press 100%, ever. People might sit there and go, no, never. It's never happened. And so the opportunity is still colossal, but you have to have, as we said, it's all about what business you want to be. And I think what I've been surprised about in Europe, especially in the recent couple of years since COVID finished, I honestly thought the true SME market would thrive. But it seems to be going the other way. It seems to be that the bigger are actually getting bigger. Now that then provides multi-platforms and confusion about what's the right application process. So, 2024 in the dying industry, there's still a shed load of things going on. And that's why, you and I spoke before, that's why I still love it so much. It's technology driven.
It is fantastic, and it's fantastic for many reasons. I mean, one thing, if you look at what comes out of the machines, that is like one thing. Another thing is obviously also that if, and I think that maybe that also been a factor for you when you had your own company, is that if you look at the gross margins, they are still high in this industry, right? The big challenge is basically to get enough work and being efficient enough for having the bottom line, the profit, the pension fund.
And I think the thing is that once you get away from the fact that print is still a very unemotional industry, as I said, and actually you simplify what it is, and you look at actually what does the mass market want, what does it require? So as I said, decline in run lengths, more SKUs. Okay, so it's not as if there's not opportunity for growth in print. There's huge opportunity, but as an industry, I believe we generally just sat there and waited for things to happen and come to us. And you can see a lot of people now are very confused. You look at the demographic of most SME owners, mid-60s, no real succession because they don't want the second generation coming into the business. Buildings paid for, assets paid for. So they've got a perfect time to get out, and you're seeing that again. People just literally shutting the doors and realizing 30 years of hard work. But if you flip that around in the next space, we've got a generation coming through who will turn this industry on its head again. Because it's all about economics, it's all about software, it's not about printing. So, I think we're in for another sort of, I think a seismic change in the next 2 years about what this industry is going to be.
Interesting. And last question: will you still be in Mexico when Drupa takes place, or will no? You're with me at Drupa. You're with me at Drupa.
I will be with you, my friend. Yes.
I'm looking forward to that. Enjoy Mexico, Anthony. But I think you should take some sunblocker, and I think you should wear a hat when you go out. That's my personal advice to you.
I think after 48 years, I should realize that I'm not very good in the sun, but we live in hope, Morten. We live in hope.
We do. Thank you, sir, and enjoy the rest of the day. And great talking to you as always.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.